What's up guys, welcome to Wasted Space and we're back in Space Engineers, and today I've got a quick video to show you a design I've been working on that again uses that crazy missile tracking script from Alysius, but this time is aiming to be a bit more efficient and more importantly is aiming to shoot at moving targets, so really as a kind of anti-fighter, anti-bomber sort of device. Now unfortunately what this does mean is that it needs to be tested on high-speed moving targets, which means Space Engineers multiplayer, which has been screwing with me all week. It's kind of why this video's late, but there you go. Done the best I could to kind of show some demonstrations of it in action. But to begin with, let's go and have a look at how I put it together and what the point of things was, because there was a specific goal with this design. So this is what it is in front of me here. I kind of ended up giving it a name, I think because I painted it. I was quite happy with the aesthetic of it all, with the kind of almost the layered armour where you've got the black stuff almost looks like it's been put on afterwards. Either way, I called it the Khopesh, kind of named after that curvy sword, and the idea behind this was the welder system. So I've actually used this system before, because it's a really tight, really efficient way of laying things out. When you're talking about projector-based designs, the biggest component, the biggest part of it all, if you're being survival ready, is by a mile and a half the cargo system, the conveyors, and those welders. You know, just taking what I sort of released last week as an example, if I bring up the Jericho, Space Engineers is being a little odd, nothing unusual there. Just look at the size of this thing and how big it ended up being just to house those 4 welders on the top and bottom. You know, that's all cargo network in there. It couldn't be any smaller than it is. That's just what's necessary to connect the whole stuff together. So they end up enormous as soon as you make a projectile that's anything bigger than tiny. So the goal here was to keep the welders super tiny. It means you can connect them straight off the back into the cargo system, and it means that you've got some limitations for the projectile, but some benefits as well. So you can kind of see how they're put together. Super Dib was simple things. They've just got what's required on them to make this script work. So forward thrust, a gyroscope, a remote control, a programming block, and a battery to power it all. And of course, a merge block at the back so we can actually separate it. The point of this design is you can kind of cheese the welder radius a little bit. So there are bits on this design that are attached kind of semi-outside the welder radius, like the battery at the front here. That's kind of extending too far forwards. But because it's also quite a large block, some of it sits within the welder radius, you can build stuff on it that you kind of feel you shouldn't have. So I'm going to jump in and actually launch off these missiles. I don't have any targets here because I'm going to jump to completely separate footage for that. It just doesn't work testing this on my own, unfortunately. I need things to shoot at. But we've got a pretty simple timer set up. Pressing 1 releases one pair, pressing 2 releases the other. The idea being you can now spread these out. And just like the other version, I would now have to sort of look in, home in on a target. I think actually I might be able to find something just behind me here to shoot at. I don't know if they're going to be willing to track onto a building that's actually friendly to me or not. I've not really tested that side of things. Maybe they will. Either way, you get kind of an idea of what the missiles are supposed to function like, really straightforward, but more importantly I can now quickly demonstrate the sort of available welding area. So just on here, if I build up, we've got basically a 5-block base here that we can build in, and then a 3-block section on top. So that's your welder radius represented, and you've given up a bit at the back because of this merge block. But it means that anything that sort of starts within these blocks will be finished. So you can then go and do funny things like, for example, get rid of that and we'll put a battery like there. Now even though almost all of that battery is outside of the weldable area, because there's a few blocks at the bottom that aren't, that are within the radius, this will still get printed. And so you can go a bit larger than the welder radius, and with a bit of sort of thinking about how the design should lay out, end up making yourself some reasonably efficient little projectiles. So can I now jump back in here, hit 8, which will weld it all up for us, turns off the projections again, because otherwise they interfere with the tracking, which is really stupid, but welders' projections in Space Engineers are their own separate grid, and of course, on that note, it has that other problem too. So if we turn the projections on temporarily and I drive around, you will be able to see... Actually, I need to launch these first, so let's slow down, get rid of the ones we've got. So if I turn this projector on, and that button will have turned them off again, you can see the sort of projection hanging out the front, and you can also see that as I move around, so does it. And this means that at any point you want to reload this thing, you have to stop. Because otherwise, so if we stop, It builds them perfectly fine, exactly like you want. You've literally just got to leave them attached for a couple of moments to allow the battery to get a little bit of charge. Starts with 30% anyway, so technically this would be pretty efficient in survival too, as long as you've got the hydrogen to support it. And then we can launch these things off. However, if I was to do the same thing while we're moving, and press 8 now, this is built them like attached to the ship instead of attached to the merge blocks because the projections moved around. And so these now won't separate. These buttons don't do anything, and the ship is stuck with warheads attached to the front. Unfortunately, that's a flaw in Space Engineers. It's just how projections work. They're all a bit weird, but it has resulted in some limitations to how you'd use this. I very much see this as the sort of thing, a bit like I mentioned with the Jericho. It's the sort of thing that would be long range in an engagement, not operating on its own necessarily, even though it's got a bit of sort of self-defense in the turrets and in its Gatling guns. And then you'd be hiding behind ridgelines like this, perhaps a few kilometers out from the fight, popping up from behind the ridgeline, and the sim speed's gone to trash by the looks of things, popping up from behind the ridgeline, letting off your missiles, and then going back down again, back into safety in order to regen, build the missiles back up again, and this whole time you can be using the camera to pick targets out of the fight. So you're looking at distance, picking things out. Anyway, that's enough jabbering about this. Let me switch over and end up the video with a bit of pre-recorded footage and probably put some music alongside it or something, because I've said what I need to say about it. There's a design, guys, on the workshop. I'll probably put the Jericho up with it as well so you can mess around. I know I didn't do that last week. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, I know it's not the end, but if you did, please hit like, please hit subscribe, really helps me in the channel out. And if you didn't, you know where that dislike button is, but hit me up in the comments, tell me how to improve as well. So thanks a lot, folks, and enjoy this little cinematic montage of things going boom with the new particle system. Yay!
No, Space Engineers.
Come on.
Oh, come on.
Wasted.